after 60 years of forming various unions, teachers came together to form the American Federation of Teachers. That same year, 1918, independent unions of firefighters came together to form the International Association of Firefighters, another union that's still with us. And the AFSCME, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, was established in 1932, and that's the same year that the American Federation of Government Employees was established. I could go on, but you get the picture. Way before there was any legal recognition of workers' right to organize in the public sector, public workers were organizing unions. And also, once they did gain bargaining rights under the law, public unions did not grow in the orderly way that the lawmakers had envisioned. These laws were really designed to head off militancy in the public sector, and in fact they did just the opposite. Because drawing inspiration from the Black Freedom Movement, public workers took direct action again and again to enforce their rights to organize. Now, the sterling example of that is the struggle in Memphis in the spring of 1968, when sanitation workers' successful campaign to win recognition for their AFSCME local garnered national support from civil rights leaders, most notably Martin Luther King Jr., as well as labor unions across the country. But strikes by public employees were hardly a new phenomenon. In 1940, a lawyer for the U.S. Labor Department counted how many times there had been strikes by public employees in U.S. history up to 1940, and he counted 1,139. And those strikes dated back to as early as the 1830s. Now, in 1958, the first year that New York City recognized public workers' right to organize. In 1958, there were only 15 strikes by public employees that year, but 10 years later, when this really got rolling, public workers staged 411 strikes in 1968, 412 strikes in 1969, and for the entire decade of the 1970s, the number of strikes by public workers averaged 375 a year. Now, the majority of all of these strikes were illegal strikes. Only in the 1980s did this strike wave end, and that was after the summer of 1981 when Ronald Reagan fired more than 11,000 striking air traffic controllers and banned them for life from federal employment. Which brings me to one more aspect of the history of labor in the public sector. After Reagan fired and banned the air traffic controllers and the replacement workers took their spots, the Controllers Union, the Professional Air Traffic Controllers Organization, PATCO, that got decertified by the federal government. Decertified it. But then, in 1987, the replacement workers and other more recently hired controllers formed a new union, the National Air Traffic Controllers Association, NATCA, which is now affiliated with the AFL-CIO. And when NATCA was established, the Reagan administration immediately recognized it and immediately began to bargain with it. In other words, not even Ronald Reagan ever challenged public workers' right to organize. In fact, as governor of California in 1968, he signed the bill that gave California workers in the public sector the right to collective bargaining. So today's round of assaults on public workers is something that we have not seen before, even in the old days of the worst of the Reagan administration. So to sum up, what I see as the most important takeaways from this national history of public sector unions, one is public workers organized unions decades before the law recognized their right to do so. Collective bargaining rights and union recognition matter a lot, but they're not the only thing that matters. Two, public sector unions mushroomed amidst a strike wave that placed public workers in step with the Black Freedom Movement. History suggests then that militancy and alliances with social justice movements are a winning combination for public workers. And 3, the challenges that we face today are unprecedented in our lifetime. The other side is not looking for compromise or for halfway measures. They're not coming after just militant labor, but all of labor. Finally, I am going to introduce to you 2 activists who can tell us firsthand about creative militancy on the part of public workers. This is why you're really here. First, we'll hear from Eleanor Bailey, a retiree from the American Postal Workers Union and a veteran of the nationwide post office strike of 1970. That was an earthquake whose epicenter was right here in New York City. And second, Tim Schermerhorn, a member of the Transport Workers Union Local 100 and founder of the New Directions Rank and File Reform Group, who will talk about the transit strike of 2005. So first, Eleanor.
Good afternoon, everybody. I've been here since about 8:30 this morning, and I sat in the corner with my bagel, cream cheese, looking and watching everybody coming in, and I'm saying, oh my God, I think I'm the oldest thing in this. But I'm so happy to see younger people. I'm so happy to see that folks are really interested in what you're doing. I always wear my retiree hat. This is the hat that counts. I was there in Washington too. I had a good time with the young folks and trying to make it up and down. Everybody was taking care of me, I have to say. Thank God for everybody, because they were really, really, really helpful getting around. I couldn't get over the idea that I had a balloon that says, oh, you don't think I had a pussy either? Anyhow, talking about the postal strike, I was very much involved in it. Let me tell you something. In case you folks don't know it, the post office is part of the United States Constitution. It is there, smack dab in the middle of the first 18th verse. So that means that the post office is a place, it has been a place that has been necessary for the United States to grow forever, okay? And I've got to put this plug in. They are attempting to privatize the post office. Yep. Folks, I'm asking you, I'm begging you to talk to your folks not to allow Congress to privatize the post office, okay? In spite of the fact that you have hard times and things are hard times, but it's been there since the beginning, let's keep it. Well, that strike. On the morning of March 17th, I worked in the General Post Office there on 8th Avenue. At that time, my local, we had about 28,000 members. And young men from the Carriers Union, because they were the instigators of this thing, came to me and said, Bailey, no, Miss Bailey. I'm now Mama Bailey, okay? Anyhow, Miss Bailey, what can you do about getting your folks out? I said, out where? He said, out on the street because we're going on strike. I said, oh, hallelujah. Now, at that time, we were federal employees. The only way anybody in the federal government got any money, got any raises, was when Congress had to give us a raise. At that time, they offered us a 5-point raise, and Congress gave themselves a 41% raise. Now you know that really got to our folks. Because of the fact that working in the post office was not exactly the most ideal condition. It was hot, it was cold. Sanitation was terrible. I have to bring in the fact that they were not prepared for women being in the post office at that time either, so we had problems there too on what they had set up for us. But we had gotten to the status and the stage where, what in the hell is Congress going to do something for us that's going to make? My local, I know that we were taking bus rides to Washington DC about every year, begging, going around to all the congressional people trying to tell them, give us some money, give us some money, give us some money. And they definitely ignored us because they didn't feel as though we deserved it. And in fact, one year we went there, in fact, the year before we went on strike, we went in there with bags of peanuts. And gave each one of the congressional people and showed them the salaries you're giving us are like peanuts. Okay, we did that. We even had the, let me say the right word, we even had the nerve to go to the Postmaster General's home with 20 busloads of people and did a picketing on the street. They had to call the cops, but we was on the street. Yeah, we took turns going in and out this cul-de-sac. Oh, this man was too pissed. But we had to do something. And I feel as though most of the federal workers were counting on us postal people because we had much more nerve to go out and do things. Now the biggest thing was the Hatch Act. It's still there. That declares that a strike is illegal. Our political involvement was a little not being able to be involved in politics technically only because we were federal employees. But on that day, when Mike came to me and said, "Bailey, what do you think?" I said, "Well, let me look at it." And I have to tell you that I'm so happy that my folks supported me on what I was doing and how I had been taking care of them. That was a very important thing that I took care of my folks in my station. I made sure that I covered them. And I have the blessing that my union covered me. So, you know what good on good does? Makes things well. Supervisors even gave me permission to have a meeting. So I talked to the folks and they said, "Whatever you say, that's what we're going to do."
Wow.
We walked out that night. And they told me that I had to be by the subway stop. As long as I was by that subway stop, they would not cross the picket line. But let me tell you something, in case you don't know this, the post office is 6 stories underground.
Right.
And there's a railroad entrance. So those that were crossing the picket line were coming there at night, go in Penn Station and go down through the post office. What these folks didn't know is that the supervisors, every time they signed in for come in, the supervisor came and gave us the papers. As to who crossed the picket line. So we had that for it. Anyhow, the strike was carried on, developed, carried on by the workers. The bosses did not come in until 2 days later. It was an 8-day strike. They came in later because they were afraid of being put in jail. In fact, all of us were slightly. But you know something? I think about the fact, I didn't even worry about the fact that I was striking against the United States government. I wasn't worried because I knew that if the way that our folks made a decision that this was going to be it, that I had their backing and they were counting on me to be up front to work on our own labor union people, our own officers, to cover this strike. It was only 8 days, but what's the man's name? God help me. Nixon. Oh, he decided that he was going to kill this strike. He called in the National Guard, the Army, the Navy, everybody to come in and work that mill. But he didn't realize that half of these folks that work in the National Guard were postal workers anyhow, you know they helped to mess up the thing a little bit more. But anyhow, when they realized, in particular, the stock market, everybody went, no mail, no delivery, no nothing, that he couldn't do anything with us. They begged and pleaded with us to go back to work. Like I said, and I want you to understand, the strike was by the people, the workers. Even our own administrative people came in after. Now, folks, I want you to know the weight that was on our folks. The fact that we sometimes, every time, thought about the fact that we could get fired. But guess what? Negotiations came with this, became the Postal Reorganization Act, which changed the post office to the Postal Service, made it a quasi-by organization. The post office does not get any monies from the government. All the monies come from stamps and sales and business deals that they do. They did not one employee was fired. God bless us for that one. And all I can tell you is that once New York started stuff, we knew that everybody had something. What they say we had, let me see, it started in New York, 30, within days, 1,000 workers in 671 locations throughout the United States decided to go on strike with us. So we had it covered. Were any of you around or you know anything about it? No? Yes?
I do remember that there was no mail, like in the 70s. I do remember that. You know, I was still in junior high.
Okay, I can understand it. Anybody? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Wait, he and I said, like I told you, I was wondering when I was looking at everybody, and I said, oh God, I'm the oldest one. And anybody in here above 80 years old? No?
I'm close.
You're close.
73.
Oh, 72. Well, I don't know if you know that I'm 87 years old. Let me see. I do want to tell you about the fact that the negotiations that were worked out after Nixon realized he could not kill the strike was the fact that they agreed to a 6% wage increase retroactive to 1969, plus an additional 8% contingent on the Postal Reorganization Act. Now that bill languished in Congress for a couple of months, but then when he finally agreed to it, we got an 8% raise and a whole new program. It was very effective, even in low-cost areas, because of the fact that the cost of the stocking of the delivery of mail was much more effective. In fact, they call this the greatest strike against government that has ever been done. I have a whole lot more I could talk about, but I know that I have to give my co-person a chance. Anybody want to ask any more direct questions about this? I can tell you. Let me tell you, brothers and sisters, if you ever become in a position like we were, where things were not right and you want to make a change, start something. You'll be surprised how these brothers and sisters will end up following you or start a whole new program. Because it can be done. And in fact, the way our situation is nowadays, it needs to be done. Thank you. Thank you.
And now, Tim Schermerhorn, let me remind you, he is a member of the Transport Workers Union, Local 100, and founder of the rank and file reform group, New Directions.
Let me start out by saying that a system-wide public transportation strike is a rare and precious thing. There have only been about 15 of them in the United States, and 3 of them have been in the Transport Workers Union Local 100. And in 2005, I was touched by all 3 strikes. As a child, the '66 strike, I was with my father. And at the mass meeting where they voted to strike, then there was one in 1980 and in 2005. There have been a number of strikes, but that was by the individual units in that eventually came together to be New York City Transit. In fact, in the 1930s and in the 1950s, 40s, it was not unusual for them to have 50 strikes a year in various components of what was not yet one system. We had just experienced a change in leadership. In New Directions, our strength was militancy on the ground, and we organized massive job actions through all our, and in 2000 election, which took over in 2001, we had a change in leadership. It would also mark a change in our cause. While we had been in leadership, those of us who operated from a rank and file perspective, with a lot of direct action, coming short in several elections. In 1997, I ran for president, and they stole the election. We proved it. We had to run again in 1998, and they stole it again, except we couldn't prove it. So, in 1999, people thought maybe a change of face would give them a better shot. Now, Roger Toussaint, who became the presidential candidate, didn't operate from the same perspective philosophically. He's basically militant service unionism. And it brought us to the 2002 contract, where he did not strike. And lots of us were looking forward to that. It had been, we hadn't had a strike since 1980, and by the 21st century, we had creeping neoliberalism, so that, which was accompanied by greater centralization in the transit authority. one of the things when we got started in the 80s is that when you stage a job action against your boss directly in the field, not only isn't he calling in the troops, but he's trying to keep it a secret that he doesn't have control of his unit. And so, and one of the things that the neoliberal perspective, everybody have an idea of what I mean? You know, the whole operating paradigm of the bosses and how they move forward. It's essentially marked by several things. It is permanent and advancing austerity for us in the private sector. Total free trade and deregulation. This is, they use other terms to talk about globalization in terms of its effect in the private sector, but the part of it in terms of the public sector is, and this is what this does in terms of your contractual actions, is that they put commissars in charge so that the direct bosses can't surrender. So in public sector, there's always the agency always brings in a negotiator, you know, and who is not not one of your regular bosses because they help them toe the line. This was compounded by the regime that took over had regretted that we didn't strike in 2002. So he responded by the 2005 strike, but it was not organized in the field. What made the strike was our rank and file, and more broadly, the working class in New York City. When our last rally, it was a couple of days before the strike. It was at the strike deadline, where everyone thought we were going to go, and we did not. At that point, though I had returned to the field, I was no longer the vice president of the union. I didn't run in 2004. We put our field organization into play, and we had 20 plus years of orienting our co-workers, the rank and file of TW Local 100, toward action. And we had serious job actions, slowdowns massively going into, we went several days past the deadline. When we finally did strike, it was carried in the field, complete field organization, the complete orientation. This gets to the structure, you know, how negotiations are structured conventionally, in that you start with an organizing team, but it always ends with one. The president of your union goes into a room with the president of your agency, and they come out with a settlement that they will argue this is the best that could be done, and so forth. This is two things. It isolates him from the real action. besides it not including the collective, it isolates him from the actual strength of your people in the field. In 2002, when I was a vice president, that's why, even though I thought we were going to strike, we didn't. I organized the divisional negotiations to actually undermine and violate the structure of negotiations. So the important thing is not your negotiation, but the action in the field. So in my division, we had massive slowdowns in job actions. And I canceled about half of the negotiations because it is a very healthy thing to do. Your officers who are locked down in hearings get a day in the field with the rank and file, and your second line officers who have to cover hearings, they get good experience. So cancel negotiations and then only call up the vice president of transportation. Do not invite the commissar, the labor relations person, who is in the room seeing that he can't surrender. The reason that that didn't work is that there's a chair of train operators, a chair of conductors. They didn't quite understand what was going on. So once we met with the vice president and said, this is what we need, and he could surrender to because the commissar isn't there. I said, okay, let's scroll it down on legal pads. And they said, no, let's get it printed up. I said, no, there's not going to be any deal. And there wasn't. So in 2005, the strike was carried forth by all of the veterans. We appointed our own strike captains in those divisions where we didn't have them. The strike was weakest in areas where there was the least organization. That is like the station department, among traffic checkers. You see those folks, sometimes you see them on buses, or at bus stops, but you see them on the train, they're writing down. They're actually writing down the traffic that is on that particular vehicle. We didn't have much organization with them, and so they could report to a building where we probably didn't have the strongest picket line. In the operating divisions, it was powerful, it was strong, and we weren't weakened. I referenced the working class broadly in New York City, in that in that strike, though I had no official capacity, it was we had a few field organizers, me being one of them, which means that I would talk to the various picket captains and survey the situation. And so when I checked in with our guy who got it started at Coney Island, he said, you know, before all the trains arrived, I started this picket line with homeless people. And I said, they jumped on. They were, I got another call from our guy at 179th Street. I had a couple of drivers. I was in a car. It was all over the city. I had my cell phone and a borrowed cell phone just to coordinate the activity because that little of it was done in terms of the administration. So I get a call and I said, what's up, Chris? He said, we got professionals on the picket line. I said, professionals? He said, sex workers. I said, yeah. I told them they could talk to you. So I talked with a couple of professionals because they were supporting our picket line. But you know that there's a lot of locations in transit. At location after location, people were telling me how, well, there's a school down the block, the teachers took up a collection, they came out, they were on our picket line, they made this donation. So we had all these field operations with their own budgets. Some of them put that to very good use. At 179th Street in Queens, the picket line got really live, in the evenings because they bought out a couple of grills, and in the evenings, striking transit workers would bring out their families and have dinner right out there on the street. So, in isolation from us, in isolation from the actual organization and operation of the strike itself, which was very strong. It was two sons actually negotiated the deal that he could not get ratified with us and agreed to arbitration afterwards because the rank and file of transit was so far ahead of the leadership of the union. Hence the disappointment with it. However, and this brings in the other thing, it is when you're able to, nothing, structurally it's a bad thing to strike and have people not feel that they were winning. But in terms of field organization, it's a tremendous boost to the workers collectively because they get a vision, a feeling of their own power that is unmatched, even with some very strong actions. To go back to a previous negotiation, one where we were betrayed by our leadership in 1999, is that that was with the, for those who are not familiar, that was with the Giuliani injunction against us. We had enough of a field operation that they put New York City police into the operating cabs on trains, besides the injunction that hit us. So in that, our leadership had more than betrayed us, and we had the strength for tools. We could have striked, but we didn't have the strength for a wildcat. In between, collective activity has a powerful effect on the members of your union, but dissatisfied with the settlement, it's a tremendous boost to field initiative when that goes forward. It also, and even with, in all three strikes, well, the 66 strike was just a flat-out victory. And the 80 strike, even though dissatisfied with the settlement, and the paying of Taylor law fines, just in terms of the anti-strike legislation, in 1966, transit workers broke the Condon-Wadlin Act.
The what?
Condon-Wadlin Act, which actually says that if you struck, you'd be fired. And they couldn't fire everybody. The Taylor law after that, while people were, there was quite a bit of discipline for Taylor law fines in 1980. But still talking to the militants in that strike, it was, people would say, I'll strike again. I'm looking for the opportunity to strike again, you know. But, well, there was a mass of people that was not, that was sore from, that strike was 10 days. And with 10 days fine, they were really feeling it. What some of them hadn't analyzed is that with the raises they got, plus that was our last contractual cost of living adjustment from the 80 strike. They were already ahead by the first year back from the strike. Within the first year, the raise that they got, the additional money, had more than paid for their fines. And that's the kind of thing it is. Bosses have gotten better at it. All right? The system is better at making the fight harder and trying to turn you back. But the strike itself is a decision to invest in yourself. And I must say, what is key is the fact that we have been operating from a rank and file perspective since the 80 strike. We weren't the wave that was, there was a rank and file movement and a union reform wave in the 70s in our union. This was also in the context of the New York City fiscal crisis, which is the template of, it was the model for imposing neoliberal reform in cities throughout the country. Briefly on that, in 1975, they declared New York City bankrupt, and they imposed a new regime on the city that was for 6 years, 76 to 82. New York City did not even have the fig leaf of democracy. It was run by a committee of bankers. The city council, board of estimate, they had to clear all decisions with the Municipal Assistance Corporation, a committee of bankers that imposed what brought transit workers to a strike in 1980 was no raise in 1976, no raise in 1978. Hence, they struck in 80. It was also at that point, and we could see in front of us in the 21st century, in the 1976 New York City fiscal crisis, the train operators, motor, the least senior of them went to the booth. None of them got laid off. Also, they were all retired now. But I had coworkers who had started as New York City cops. And in 1976, when they cut the police force, they even cut the police force, they were assigned to the booth. They became railroad clerks. So that at the end of the crisis in the early 80s, they had accrued a little transit time, and some of them had taken promotions inside transit. And so one of the things that we saw in terms of the new paradigm going forward was it wasn't just new technology, things in the towers and so forth. Some of it was addressed with new technology, but they were, in fact, partially privatizing the admission to the subway. They were closing the booths. That it was the first time in the history of the subway that they actually closed those areas, saying there's not going to be a railroad clerk taking fares here anymore. So we were looking at the cutback on our jobs, them attacking specific titles, and there was no way that the leadership of our union could have gotten by without a militant action, even though they couldn't do with that what we wanted to do. I think I should stop there.
Okay. We have almost an hour for lunch to questions, comments, and I'm going to be the staff person. So, Mike, and I'll make a